And we are live. Andy, Shayla,
We are live.
live.
Ah,
So today, Andy, we have Mr. Tressler, Nelson Tressler.
Nelson
He has
Tressler, we got
a
the show.
remarkable story.
Yeah, remarkable story. When his mother was 15 years old with him, she was raped by a police officer. Her father shot two police officers, and that was what he was born into. So he was born into this. And he wrote a book that's called The Unlucky Sperm Club. And the tagline on it is "You are not a victim of your circumstances." And I just thought it would be fascinating to discuss the dynamic, because before he was born, his mom is already testifying at the court to sort of save her father from going to prison for the rest of his life. So it would be nice to, unpack how that life looked, what he had to overcome, and yeah, what brought him there. So we're doing that today on
Hilarious.
I love it.
Forget it.
What I was gonna say, see what happens when I give you control.
I kind of like it. I get to surprise you.
Yes. It's the first show
So
we have not introduced by name, which I think is also great.
this is
Um,
Andy Taylor.
you're pointing the wrong way. Yes, this is Bambos Charles Dimitri. We can touch fingers, Bambos. Like. No, no, go the other way, because remember the guest yesterday. They have challenges if we're on the wrong side of the screen. Um, yes, Bambos. I am 5 days into my walk. So for those that aren't aware of it, I've chosen to do a pilgrimage along the entire west coast of the Netherlands. And today is the fifth day of that walk. I'm now in Egmond on Zee, which is 80 kilometers north of where I started, which was Hoek van Holland. So I didn't get to take a shower yet, so I must say, you don't want to be near me because I've been
I'm so
sweating.
happy I'm not sitting next to you. Did
Yes.
you guys swim in the ocean today?
No, we did not. Ever since I saw you go into the ocean, my feet froze, and I just decided that I'm going to leave that experience for another day. Yes, but I did
Promise?
write about it in the article that I'm preparing for the magazine Dutch, which is going to be covering the story. I wrote about that experience, the humiliation of being laughed at by Dutch people as I walk out of the ocean and they say, you can only go in as far as your knees. Yeah.
Nice, Andy.
So it was a really beautiful day. Yeah. I've really been enjoying the trip. I have to say a lot of, when you walk and you leave a lot of spaciousness, then just thoughts, they can wander and you have realizations. And I've been really enjoying the space. And I
Did
must
you have
also say, what?
did you have any realizations that would be worth sharing?
I mean, there's a lot of new show ideas that have come up. Just show ideas. I'm like, oh, I'd like to do a show on that, this, and that. Like I told you earlier, I want to do a show on authority. Like I've got a trouble with authority. I've decided something else. I will be doing walking tours every year. I will be doing walking tours every year for a week, and I'm actually planning on offering this as a business. So I will arrange walking tours for groups or individuals all throughout the year, and that was a decision I made today. So
Beautiful.
that's a big decision. And just I'm going to do what I love, and of course I'll just charge people, a rate that's reasonable, and then they can accept it or not. But yeah, that came out of today.
So we both had new business ideas today. I won't be sharing mine. Just for the note of it, Bulelang is celebrating his birthday, and he's all the way in South Africa.
All
And I just
along, We love you. I would sing it to you, but I know you would hate us for doing that. So all we're going to do is say happy birthday to you, Bolalang.
To you, happy birthday to
To
you.
you, happy
Happy
birthday
birthday,
to our
dear
dearest
Bulalang.
listener. Happy birthday to
You,
you.
we love you, man. Thank
We
you.
love you, Bolalang. Thank you. Yeah.
So, Andy, I think it's time we bring Nelson on
Yeah.
and we have this journey with him.
Yep. I think it's fascinating. I love taking the journeys with people. So, Nelson, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Is it your birthday as well? Because we'll sing to you as well if it's.
It's not my birthday, unfortunately.
I have to tell you before we begin, when I saw the title, The Unlucky Sperm Club, I was going to book you before I even saw you because I thought this is just a fantastic title.
You know what? That's great because it can go either way. I've had people who say, "Oh, you know what? I looked at it and I'm like, oh, maybe not." But and then the other way, people love it and it intrigues them.
Yeah, I mean, I think what it did for me is it immediately my mind started to wander because I've often even said things like, oh, I feel like I was lucky to be born at this time where I didn't have to go into a war. And so in some weird way, I'd say, I would never refer to it as being in the Lucky Sperm Club. But on another level, I think, well, I've not had to go through some of the tortures other generations may have had to go through.
Yeah, and I spin that in my book. I mean, I call it the Unlucky Sperm Club, but by the end of the book, I realize that I'm really part of the Lucky Sperm Club, having to deal with all the things that I had to deal with and making me who I am.
Yeah. How long? I got a question. Go.
Nelson, there's a very strange echo coming from you. Hello, hello.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I don't have an echo on my side, Bambos.
Oh, then it's just me. Okay, good.
Yeah.
If it's just me, don't worry about it.
Okay.
So I've got a question for you. I have a few, of course, but I lost my thought now that I went to the echo. Give me a sec just to connect back to my original thought. How long did it take for you to be comfortable to share this story? Like, when was the first time you remembered I can share this story and own it and not feel like, oh, maybe I want to hide it? Like, when was that for you?
I never shared the story until I was, and I'm hearing that feedback too.
Oh,
can you hear it now?
I hear you fine. I don't get any
Just a
feedback.
little bit.
Okay. Yeah, I never shared the story with anybody. When I left my town, I never shared it with anybody except for my wife for 45 years.
Wow.
And it's one of those things that weakened me. I ran from it. I didn't want to be associated with it. And we can get into the story so people understand what I'm talking about. But yeah, it took me a long time to share it. And now, it's the same exact thing that happened to me. I just gave it a different meaning. Before it weakened me.
By the way, I interrupt you because one of the listeners is now saying that they have the echo. So I want to see if we can fix that before we continue. Otherwise, unfortunately, we won't be able to use the audio after the show. Is there anything that we can do, Bambos, that you think on your side? Is there anything on your side that might be the cause of that?
No, everything's off on my side. So it might be a mobile device, or maybe Nelson needs to log out and in again.
No, I
never had that issue.
That's weird. Okay, well, Ira Edis, who is often here, Edis, is the issue still there? Can you just let us know so we can repair it or continue if it's working better in the meantime?
I can also let you know.
Oh, well,
it's also me. I hear it.
Interesting. Could it be the echo from my phone that's kind of creating that? Maybe even.
Hello, hello.
Is it okay or no?
No, there's an echo also when I speak.
Okay. Well, that's a shame because obviously we want to use the audio from this for the podcast. So it's always, we almost lose the opportunity to turn into a podcast because the audio engineer hates Nelson when I don't deliver him clean audio.
I'm sure.
So let's go back again. Sorry. So let's at least start again. I forget what the question was and where we went. Oh, you said to start with the background of the story itself.
Yeah. So, I mean, my mom became pregnant with me when she was 15 years old. And while she was pregnant with me, her father, who was the local trash collector in a small town, drove into the town square. There he saw two police officers. He stuck a gun out the window and opened fire on those police officers, killing one and critically wounding another. And eventually he was captured and brought to stand trial where he was facing the death penalty. And during his trial, my mom got up and testified that the reason that her father had shot and killed that police officer was that that police officer had raped her, and she was now pregnant with me. And that's how my life started. It didn't get any easier from there. Of course, I'm born to a 15-year-old mother. Eventually, she finds a man and marries when she's 21. Come to find out, he's very physically and emotionally abusive to me and my mom on a daily basis. They quickly have 4 children in quick succession. And because of the lifestyle that they're living, a lot of the basic needs of my siblings fall upon me. And I remember at the end of 4th grade, looking down and being excited to see where I was going to go to 5th grade. And I see that I have straight Fs and that I'm going to be repeating the 4th grade. I missed like 50 or 60 days of school that year. I couldn't read, couldn't write, couldn't spell. The next year I got placed into special ed. Come to find out I have dyslexia. And that's the way my life went for a while until one day my stepfather was walking home drunk from a bar, and somebody else was driving home drunk from that bar, and they ended up hitting and killing him. And it's at this time, here's my mom. She has 5 small children. She's dropped out of school in the 8th grades, never worked outside of the home. And as hard as her life has been to this point, she could not figure out a way that she was going to make it work on her own with 5 small children. So it's at this time that she decided that she was going to take her own life. And fortunately, she was not successful. But when she got out of the hospital, that's when my family got split up. And I went to go live with my grandmother, the wife of the man who shot and killed the police officer. And that was kind of the fork in the road, because for the first time in my life, there was always food in the house. The lights always turned on when you hit the switch, and there was always heat in the winter. And that was not the case when I was living with my mom and stepdad. So I started to reflect upon where I was going, with my life. And I didn't like where I was going. And one day a counselor came from the local university to talk about what you needed to do to get into college. And like all the bells and whistles went off in my head. Like if I could get a college degree from that point on, my life would be perfect. That's what I thought. And so I started to think, okay, I'm going to do this. And then that voice in the back of your head screams at you anytime you're going to try to do something that's uncomfortable. And I remember thinking to myself, Nelson, you can't read, you can't write, you can't spell. You have dyslexia. Of the family that I came from, my mom came from 15 children. Only 2 had ever graduated high school. None had even ever attended a college. But, I knew it was an uphill battle, but I knew where I was headed as well. And a long story short, it took me 12 years, 4 different universities, 4 years in the United States Air Force, but I finally became that first person to graduate college and get a college degree.
Wow. That's insane. When when you share this story, first it makes me want to cry, because I see the adult you, but I can't help but feel the 4th grade or the 5th grade that has no control over their life at all, and the circumstances around them are dictating their reality, and they don't have any power. There's such a powerlessness in that situation. It's hard for me to empathetically allow that in, because it feels so overwhelming.
I think the thing that saves people in these situations is they don't understand that it's different. And I think that was my saving grace, is I didn't realize things were different out there, that other families didn't act like this and do these sorts of things and live in these conditions. So I think that was my saving grace.
You know, I saw this as you were speaking. I'm sure you've heard the connection, but I watched that Netflix movie, The Hillbilly Elegy, which I'm sure has been mentioned a lot to you. And as you spoke, there's the child in that who basically his mother was a drug addict, and he goes to live with grandma at some point. And it's interesting because it feels a bit similar to, in some weird way, would you almost see your grandma to really be your role model? Did she sort of shape who you became?
Oh yeah. You know, my gram had 15 children. She's lived through the hell of her husband shooting and killing a police officer and dealing with that. You know, grew up during the Great Depression. But one thing, you know, my gram told me every single day, Nelson, you're going to make something of your life. You're going to do something. And she said it so lovingly and she believed it so thoroughly. And I loved her so much that I didn't want to let her down. So I think that was a lot of my drive as well.
Wow. That's beautiful. I spoke to my brother last evening, and he said to me, we went to Catholic school, and one of the nuns took him aside when we were quite young, and she said, I feel like you're a natural born leader. And he, from that age, immediately connected to that the rest of his life. And he said, you know, it's now 30 odd years after that moment. He said he called her to let her know what that belief in him meant to him and how much it helped him. And as I hear these role models, they no one knows how such a little gesture has a massive impact on another individual.
Yeah, and I think that can be positive or I think it can be negative. I think there's so many people out there in those authority positions. They need to be very careful of how they talk to children, because I think a lot of that has to do with somebody telling them what they're going to do, and then you have that self-fulfilling prophecy. I mean, whether it be a parent or a teacher or a coach, because a lot of people, you know, I've also been told I wasn't going to amount to anything from a lot of people in my town and even in my family. You know, whenever I got accepted to college, you know, everyone in my family wasn't a huge fan. I mean, it was always said with a wink and a smile, but they're like, boy, they must be letting anybody into college, or geez, don't you have to know how to spell to get into college? And, you know, all these things. And, that kind of drove me. I mean, one thing in my life is I'm not going to let somebody else dictate the type of life that I'm going to live. And if there are people out there that are doubting on me, not only am I going to show them that I can make it, I'm going to show them that I can be the best. And I've used that throughout my life. You know, I became obsessed with goals and personal development after achieving that first big goal of getting a college degree. And I've been able to, you know, I work for a top 5 commercial real estate firm. I became the top salesman worldwide in the retail division several times. I've started more than 10 businesses, including one of the largest privately held pet resorts in the country. You know, I just celebrated my 25th wedding anniversary. You know, all these things are things that have driven me to, you know, in the back of my mind, I think there's something to show those people, like, you know, here, I'll show you. You don't think I'm going to amount to anything because of where I came from. Not only am I going to show you that I can, I'm going to show you that I can, you know, far exceed anybody's expectations.
I've got so many questions, but I always want to leave space for Bambo. So I'm going to ask him if you got anything you'd like to ask before I continue.
I'm feeling very emotional being with you. Yeah, there's a like, as you're speaking, I can see you and the little boy, like being held in this big man's body.
Yeah.
And I just want to thank you for being on the show and for how you're showing up. I recognize the way you're talking. Also, I came from a kind of abusive background, 10-year drug addiction, 5 suicide attempts in my life. And I remember I also used to speak, I'm going to show you, And I realized when I spoke, it was coming from a pain of never being recognized. And I'm wondering if you resonate with that.
Yeah, I think so. I think some of that, especially early on in my life, it was to prove some people wrong, and I got to that point and really used that as fuel early on. But then once you realize what your potential is, and we all have this incredible potential within us, then it's more like, how far can I go? You
Mm.
know, how far can I take this? I mean, I've been blessed with so much potential. I've been blessed with circumstances that drive me. I've been blessed with an awesome family that supports me and believes in me. And now, 40 years later, I'm a totally different person than I was then, because I'm striving to become that best version of myself possible. And I think we owe it to the world to do that, all of us.
Mm.
Have you ever considered motivational speaking?
To do what?
Have you ever considered motivational speaking?
Yeah, you know what? I'm training right now to do that. I feel like that's a great opportunity to share my message and get it out there. And I'm at a point in my life, I've exited my businesses. I've retired from commercial real estate. And you get to that point in your life, like, what are you going to do if time and money didn't matter? What would you do? And I reflected upon the life that I had lived, and I feel like, I've lived this life to share it with others, to inspire and motivate them to understand that they're not victims of their circumstances. I mean, we all, and my circumstances might seem extreme. I know everybody's circumstances, no matter what they are, people struggle with them and they need help to overcome them. And some of them might seem mundane compared to others, but they're still their tough circumstances that they have to overcome. And if my story and my book and my program can help people do that, that's what I feel like the rest of my life is out here to do, is to help other people. I want to change the world one person and one inspiring goal at a time.
I've got a question going back a little bit to your history. When you had such a different background than many of the people, that you weren't aware of it at the time, but when you had the background and you went to college and you started meeting people that had an entirely different life experience, how was it? And like, what were the things you discovered? And when you started to realize, well, in some ways, my life experience is so different than these people. Like, how did that evolve?
At college, so I got the opportunity to go to college my first time to play football. I was a pretty good athlete. That's the only way I ever got into college. Be under no illusion that as soon as I set a goal to go to college, that I turned into this A student. Far from it. I think I had a 2.2 grade point average through high school, which I don't know how I got into college. I guess they massaged the admission requirements because of football, and it wasn't one of those nice Swedish massages. It was the elbow in the back, tears coming out of your eyes massage. But I got in. But I got to the end of the first year and I had a bill of $3,500. I was living with my grandma at the time. She made $4,800 a year on Social Security. There's 7 other people living with her at the time. So there was no way I was ever going to be able to go back to college. That's when I joined the Air Force. And the first time I ever flew in an airplane, and I'm flying, to basic training, and I look out the window and it hits me that, Nelson, you get to be anybody that you want to be now. Nobody knew my backstory. Nobody knew my history. Nobody knew the circumstances of my birth. And it was the most liberating thing, because when I landed there, Tressler meant absolutely nothing to any of those people. And I got to be anybody that I wanted to be. And that's kind of where I determined that, you know what, this is my life. And the person who's going to make it or break it is me. And that's when I just started to go for everything that I could and really strive to reach my potential.
That's beautiful. Like, I love that I call those life do-overs. And I've had like 2 or 3 of those in my life where it was like, okay, I've lived in several countries, and each time you go into a new country, you're like, wow, I can redefine myself in any way I want now because there's no history. So when you speak that way, I almost think everyone should have an opportunity to have the do-over, because in a weird way, whatever you did to that point, some of the habits you made weren't serving you, but it's hard to break them because your environment reinforces them.
Yeah, and that's a lot of times that's all we need is that switch. And you talk about public speaking, and the speech that I'm working on right now is, why are you bothering swatting at flies while you're standing in a pile of crap? And
Yeah.
that pile of crap can represent the places we are, the people that we're hanging out with, or the beliefs that we have. And if you want to do over, look at, if you're swatting at flies, and flies are those problems and those frustrations that surround the piles of crap that we're in. If you find yourself swatting at a bunch of these problems, take a look down at your feet. Chances are you're standing in a pile of crap. And whether that's the place that you're at, your work or your town or your country or what have you, you got to get out of that pile of crap, or those flies are just going to keep coming. It can be the people that you're around, or it can be the beliefs that you have. I had a lot different beliefs growing up about success and money and family, and all of those things, than I have now. And because of that, I had issues. But yeah, so you get to have those do-overs, but you got to figure out where you got to get out of first before you have those. But yeah, they're liberating.
Yeah, I had a beautiful experience the last week. As I mentioned on the coming onto the show, I've been doing this tour along the West Coast, just walking, and everyone says, "Why are you doing this?" And like as if it was why climb Mount Everest? And the answer is always because it's there. There's a coast, and that's a good enough reason. But what I noticed is that because I'm actively doing this, I'm posting more pictures because I'm doing it. I'm taking shots, and I'm really enjoying it. And I've had individuals I lived in Vienna, Austria for many years. And I've had 2 individuals from Vienna say, listen, I don't like that you're publicizing so many pictures. And I had this funny moment. It was a realization today as I was walking. I was remembering, the culture that says, hey, listen, don't promote yourself that much. Keep yourself low, because if you're trying to be bigger than anything, then actually that's a negative. And it just hit me. Bambos and I spoke earlier, what were the realizations I was having on this trip? And it was, one of the realizations was, oh my God, I forget how the environment you are in, or the society, right? It can be your friend group, but it can be the country, or the world, right? Because you really can move down into a macro or a micro vision of it. That group will really pull you and keep you in places where you're not even aware of it because you just were born into it. So this was the humor as I was realizing, wow, when I was in Austria, I was really being limited by a culture which was trying to push me down all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you hear that saying, if you're hanging out with 5 millionaires, you're going to be the 6th. If you're hanging out with 5 losers, you're going to be the 6th. And we really need to be very hyper focused on the people we spend a lot of time with, because we're going to gravitate towards what they're doing and their thoughts and their programming.
Yeah. I had the humorous situation where my wife was hanging out with these single women who were trying to sabotage our relationship.
Yeah.
And every time she'd go out with them, she'd come back with all of this weird stuff, and I could hear her wheels spinning. And I one day said, you know what? Like, you can't hang out with those people anymore. Like, I don't want their stuff in my head. Like, you gotta and it was a very funny thing, because as soon as I heightened the consciousness around it, she became very aware where she was slipping into this. If I'm miserable, I want you to be miserable because I don't want to feel so bad about my own life.
No, and that's so true. I think, it's those people who are reflecting the way they feel upon you. And if you're feeling good and you're living a good life and they're not, that makes them feel even worse about their situation. So
Yeah.
yeah, you got to be careful with that group of friends for sure.
Yeah. I noticed. I even went back to. Sorry, Bambos. I keep going. So it just interrupt. Like, put your finger up because I keep hearing myself speak because I'm enjoying myself. Sorry. Um, I was in the U.S. in December, January of this year, and I noticed compared to the Netherlands, there's a very heavy energy in the U.S. Very depressed, very anxious, very fearful. A lot of media promoting the fear and the anxiety. And what I saw was that I was upbeat, I was laughing, but at some point, the fun and the humor I started to see was creating tension in the people that were feeling so in a weird way, I felt like, well, I got to tone down the happiness that I'm feeling, because if I share it in a way, there's this big contrast with the people who aren't feeling it. And now they feel uncomfortable. So now I have to make myself like appear to be less happy than I am, so they don't have to feel as uncomfortable.
Yeah, you know, I talk about this in my book, The Unlucky Sperm Club. It's called the crab bucket mentality. And in short, you know, if you put one crab in a bucket next to the sea, that crab can crawl out and go to the sea. But if you put more than one crab in that bucket, if a crab tries to crawl out of that bucket, the other crabs will reach up and pull it back down. And if it continues, they'll break its legs. And if it continues to get out, try to get out after that, they'll actually kill it. And humans have kind of adopted this strategy, you know, whether it be success or health or whatever. Whenever they see you going above and beyond, they start to want to pull you back down to where they are. And if you continue to do it, I mean, they'll come out with, you know, pitchforks after you. And I've seen a little bit of this since I've you know, put my book out there. Some of the family that I thought I had a great relationship with have just come out and started to call me all kinds of names and liar and this. And I'm like, where is this coming from? Like, we had a great relationship for 40 years. We never had a crossed word. And now all of a sudden I'm this horrible guy who put this book out there, and I'm a money grubber. And, you know, I don't believe in my faith. And it was just mind blowing.
Yeah, there's a term. We actually did a show on this. There's a term that's used in the UK. It's in Australia called cutting the tall poppy. I think that's the term in Australia. Basically, anyone who wants to elevate themselves, other people who feel like they're putting themselves above them, they have to cut them down to size. And that show, unfortunately, our audio engineer, editor, producer said, Andy, the quality of the show isn't good enough. So we didn't get it made it into the actual podcast. But well, I love the topic.
Yeah, there's two ways to be the tallest building in town, right? You can build it, which takes a lot of time and effort and energy, or you can break down all the other taller buildings than you, and that's easier to do. And I think that people have adopted, you know, both those strategies, but I think people who aren't willing to put forth that time and that energy and that effort, they go about trying to just tear down anything that seems taller than they are.
I'm going to put my finger up. Nelson, tell us a little bit about when you decided to write the book. What was happening for you?
Yeah, so like I said, I was able to exit some of my businesses. I made a goal to be in and out of commercial real estate in 20 years. And I did that in 2020. And I just got to the point where I'm not one to put my feet in the sand and watch the waves crash in. It would drive me bonkers. I know a lot of people, that's kind of their end goal, but not mine. And I still have a 15-year-old at home. So I had to figure out, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? Because I'd love to travel and hike roads and do all that. I mean, that's my end game. But with a child at home, I can't do that yet. So I'm like, what do I want to do? And that's when I started reflecting upon the life that I lived, and you know, this story that I have. And you know, I think when people hear that story, their mouths kind of hang open. And there's a lot of twists and turns in that story. You know, I will tell you, as I said here today, I still don't know who my father is for sure. So, and I talk a lot about this in my book, The Unlucky Sperm Club. Things are not as cut and dry as they seem, but
hold on. So even that isn't clear.
No.
And there hasn't been the desire to do your 23andMe or anything like that.
I've done it. And really the book came out. I thought I knew who my father was. And there were some other half sisters in town that I thought growing up, like, okay, but never had a relationship with them. And I talk a lot about this in the book. I don't want to spoil the book, but then, yeah, 23andMe came out, and all of a sudden, who I thought was my father is not my father, and now I don't know who it is.
So even the fact that your grandfather shot the policeman who he thought was the father wasn't even the situation, wasn't true.
Yeah, and again, in that story, there's a lot of twists and turns and a lot of theories on why things happened and why my mom did what she did.
Okay.
But yeah, growing up though, that was the story, and again,
And what happened to your grandfather in this?
He ended up dying in prison, more than 40 years behind bars.
40 years. Wow.
Yeah.
40 years. And the because there was, I guess it would have been statutory rape if your mom was 15 years old. Was there ever anything that was like dealt with regarding that, or was that all a made up story? Just I know this is the book, but is that?
Yeah, I mean, my grandfather was facing the death penalty for what he did. After my mom's testimony, the first trial ended in a hung jury. The state took the death penalty off the table and only sought life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Okay. Wow.
And then there were always appeals to try to get that sentence lessened. So, everything had to stay status quo to make sure that there was still that opportunity for my grandfather.
And is your mother still alive, or what's?
Yeah, my mom's still alive. She was just out here. My oldest son just got married, and her and my stepdad came out. And that's one of the great things in this story is not only was I able to turn my life around and live a much better life. My mom, as soon as my stepfather was hit and killed by the drunk driver, met another man who was the total opposite, who treated her like a queen, and for the last 35 years has given her a life and raised my 3 younger brothers as his own. And she's living a life that she couldn't have imagined. And she's a great grandmother and a great mother. And yeah, I mean, she's the real hero of the story, I think.
And because I mean, in some weird way, there's like kind of a mystical history there. Like, how is it when you discuss with her the history of things like even not knowing who your father is? Like, do those subjects come up, or how do you address that with her?
Yeah, I mean, when I was writing the book, of course, I was going back and forth with my mom, getting some of the stories and fine tuning them. And it was hard for my mom because my mom will be the first to admit, you know what, she made a lot of mistakes growing up. But and people ask me like, do you have a relationship with your mom? Do you hold her accountable? No, I mean, my mom was 15 years old and pregnant, and then testified. And in fact, after my mom's testimony, the year or so after that, she was targeted by the local police because of her testimony, and she was thrown into jail several times. And then she, hooks up with this man who beats her almost daily. She has 5 kids, no education. And I mean, what am I supposed to expect from her? I mean,
yeah.
The fact that any of her kids made it out and are living productive lives, which all of her kids are, I mean, that's goes back to her and dealing with her circumstances and really going above and beyond that. And now she's a great grandmother, and my kids love her, and all of her grandchildren love her. And we can't be too quick to judge
No.
until we take a walk in their shoes, and I've done that because that was not always my feelings on my mom. Like I blamed her. Like, why am I dealing with this? Like, I wasn't even born, and I talk about some of the stories in my book where, in 8th grade, I go to pick up my date, and my cousin drives me, and they make up a story that, hey, we have to pick her up because we're going to a family event. And I'm like, oh, well, we can bring her home. No, we'll pick her up. It's on the way. And then come to find out, I dated this girl all through high school, and her parents tell me, they're like, we weren't going to let her go because of who you guys were. We followed you to the dance to make sure you didn't pull off the road and rape her. And then we told her the only way she was able to go with you is if we picked her up a half an hour early because we didn't trust you guys to bring her home. So, I mean, I dealt with those sorts of things. And, you know, I mistakenly was dating the granddaughter of the police officer who lived from my grandfather's shooting, and found that out while I was over at her house, and her dad, who was also a police officer, said, do you know who this kid is? And I was never allowed to see her again. So
Yeah.
there were all these things in my childhood that I had to deal with because of what happened. And I definitely had that victim mindset growing up sometimes, because I felt like I didn't do any of this stuff. I mean, you know, I can't help that. Why are people, you know, fighting out against me? But you know what? It made me who I am today.
Mm.
And people ask me, would you trade any of it? I wouldn't. I wouldn't trade any of it.
I still can't get over the fact that in not in a judgment way, but in a like that you don't even have any idea who your father would be, because your mom must, I think, have some clue. If it wasn't him, it could have been him, or him.
She had a couple hit and runs, as she puts it.
Okay, so you had a couple hit and runs. Okay,
yeah,
got it. Oh, okay, so we've all had a hit and run here and there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she, and you know what? I didn't have a relationship with any father. I mean, I have my stepfather now with my mom, and I call him dad. It took me 40 years to call him dad, to call him.
Wow.
And we have a great relationship. We get together a few times a year. I mean,
by the way, that makes me, I almost want to cry when you said that. Like it took you 40 years to say to him and call him dad. What did it mean for you to call him dad?
Yeah, I think it meant, because my other brother, he had raised them from the time they were very young. And I was off living with my grandmother at that time, so I didn't have that same relationship. And yeah, so I mean, I just always called him by his first name, was Pat. And we started to build this relationship as I was an adult, and he would come out to Vegas to visit me. And I have a cabin up in Utah, and we would go up there and hang out and have fun. And we started to vacation together with my mom. And it got to the point, like, he talked to my mom, and he's like, why doesn't he call me dad? And we had a conversation, and I'm like, you know, and then I started to call him dad, and you know, that relationship flourished. And like I said, they were just out for my son's wedding last week, or 2 weeks ago now, I think, and just a great relationship with him. And I'm so grateful for him. I mean, I'm so grateful that you know, my mom has lived the life that she's lived because of him, and my brothers have lived the life because of him. And what a blessing he's been in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that so beautiful. I think there's a weird, when the step to call someone dad, there's a humility in that I hear that would take me to say, I'm going to be vulnerable enough to, because what I hear come up in me when I hear myself say it is that if I'm going to call him dad, I'm going to allow that love that I never received into my life. And that's why it touched me so deeply.
Yeah. And you know, here's this guy. So my mom had me when she was 15. My mom is 5 years older than my stepdad. And so he's 10 years older than me. He's like 5'2", has red hair, and he introduces me as his son and my other brothers as his son. Now, my other brothers are 6'6", 6'3", 6'2", and here's this little 5'2" redheaded, you know, guy, and he's like, "These are my sons, not my stepsons." And the people look at him and they're like, "Dude, your wife's got some explaining to do to you."
Yeah. That is beautiful. I have another weird question. You mentioned earlier that you had dyslexia, and 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 yet you wrote a book. So how does that how did it go from, okay, I have this dyslexia, and how does it then a book get produced?
Yeah, lot of hard work. I'm so glad that I was born in the time when the technology is what it is. A lot of talk to text, uh, and I've come to the ability where I can read very well. But I still cannot spell, and no matter how hard I try, it's a battle for me. But if I can talk to text, I can proofread it well enough to get it to an editor that can clean it up for me and make sure that I'm spelling things right and using the right there and the right then and all those sorts of things. But yeah, it was something too that I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. To show other people that writing a book is one of those things I think a lot of people have on their bucket list.
Mm.
And if somebody with dyslexia who still, as they said here today, can't spell anything over 4 letters, if I can do it, so can you. Where there's a will, there's a way, right?
Yeah, I love it. By the way, I also have had trouble reading as a kid. I had to go to special reading, and I was never diagnosed with dyslexia, but I certainly wouldn't have surprised me if there was some degree of it. And I also saw that that the ability to even speak, if you read Ramos has read my book 15 times, and he reads it because it's kind of like a meditation. So he's not crazy. He is crazy, but not for that reason. But what I found interesting is that he says, when I read your book, I hear your voice because you speak exactly as you read. And that's very much similar to what you just said, is that I'm actually doing what you do, is I'm reading basically how I would speak, or I'm writing as I would speak, say.
Yeah, and the way that I consume my knowledge is through Audible. Like, I've always been an Audible learner because of dyslexia. So I
Mm.
listen to my books. I can listen to them a lot faster than I can read them.
Yeah.
And I actually recorded my book on Audible, which that's one of those things where I've listened to literally, I would say close to 1,000 books over 25 years, maybe more.
Wow.
But to hear your voice, download your book on something that you've listened to for 20 years is just something that was so satisfying. And as I'm driving down the road in my car, listening to my book in my voice, it's kind of one of those just, wow, I made it. Exactly. I made it type of
I love it.
moment. And the smile on my face, driving down the road was just, one of the biggest things I've had in my life.
That is beautiful.
Nelson, did you discover anything about your past or about yourself while writing that book?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of reflection on there. I think there was a lot of therapy in writing this book because I hadn't really thought about a lot of those moments for a long, long time. Like I said, I ran from them. It weakened me. But then as I kind of got into reflecting upon those and drawing strength from it, I think I realized what type of person was inside of me and could get through that. So yeah, I think writing that book really helped me deal with a lot of things that happened in my childhood that I had kind of pushed way, way in the back of my brain.
What were the big takeaways from it?
You're not a victim of your circumstances. I mean,
Uh,
you are actually a product of your choices, and that's one of the fact that we have free agency, that we get to choose every single day what we want to do, is the greatest gift.
so sorry to interrupt you, but would you say that that's something you only discovered through writing the book, or would you say that you were aware of that and you just articulated it through the book?
Yeah, no, I became aware of that. I think, just at a very minute level whenever I graduated from college and realized, hey, I chose to do this and I actually could do it. So I think it started there. But then over the last, 25 years, I've used that in every area of my life. And I realized I'm in control of this life. I can't control everything that happens, but I can control how I react to everything that happens to me.
Yeah.
And if it's benefiting me, then, I'm making those choices. And why on earth would I ever make a choice that's not benefiting me? And I've realized that. And I'm a true believer. I know there's outliers and there's situations, but I truly believe you're exactly where you choose to be right now. You're exactly where you choose to be in your health, in your relationships, in your, wealth, whatever. You're exactly where you choose. And if you don't want to be there anymore, if you don't like where you're at in any of those areas of your life, then make different choices and start to choose, and you'll end up somewhere else. It's like being at a card table. Like, people get this hand dealt to them like I did, and they're like, oh, okay, this is the hand that was dealt me. I got to play it. That's not the case. Like, discard. Life is life. You get to discard as many times as you want and ask for another, deal them again, man. I didn't like that hand.
Yeah.
And the way that you do that is by making different choices. You start to choose differently. Like, if you don't like, if you don't like where you are financially, let's start making different choices. And, everyone wants that overnight success. They see these people and it doesn't happen. I mean, you have that 15-year-old who's on YouTube, who's making $1 million, and everybody wants to be that type of person. And, I have a cabin up in Utah, and I was up there a couple weekends ago snowmobiling. And as I'm snowmobiling, I'm just thinking, man, I am so glad that I played the long game in my life. And it was so many reasons. It was like, hey, I have a cabin because I played the long game financially. And you know what? My health. I could play as long and as hard as I wanted to because I was in good shape and I played the long game with my health.
Yeah.
And my wife, she couldn't come up because her grandmother was sick, but there was never a question like, oh, you're not going up there by yourself, because she would think that I was up to no good or anything like that. So I was happy I played the long game in my relationships, in my marriage. And the list just went on and on. And, here I am, 49 years old, looking back, and so blessed that I played the long game, that I didn't look for those quick overnight successes and, risk everything on that get rich quick scheme, or, have that one night of romance that, I wanted. And I was just so happy I had played that long game, and that now I'm reaping the benefits of that. And, I have to pinch myself every morning I wake up that, this is the way my life has turned out.
Yeah. I find what you mentioned, like when I'm working with people that are a bit younger, and you sort of do mentoring work with them, then the patience is not there. So if it can't give the return at a speed at which which they think, because of the person you mentioned on Instagram or wherever they are, then they're like, oh, it's not right. I got to be able to make people are making money. And even the people on Instagram, they're standing in front of cars they didn't even purchase, giving you the idea that they have that money, which they don't. So it's
no. And it's so true. And what ends up is 5 years passes, 10 years passes, and all of a sudden you're looking like, where in the world did 5 or 10 years go? I mean, especially if you have small children who are growing and getting married, you're really like reflecting back on where did the time go. But I think if you're living life with purpose, I'm a huge goal guy. That's what I Got Smarter is all about. That's my goal program and my app that I have out there. And it's really teaching people how to live life with purpose, so that, we're all going to get to the end of our lives and have some regrets. But if you live life with purpose, if you really live your life by goals and really designing a life that you want to live, you're gonna get to the end of your life hopefully with a lot less regrets than if you just kind of went the way the world pushed you and just did what kind of came to your feet.
Yeah.
I kind of had the thought as you were speaking. Thank you for sharing that, by the way. The moment when they came after your mother tried to commit suicide and they came to split up the family, that must have been high tension moment. Like, what's happening?
Yeah.
How
Yeah,
old were you?
I was 11.
You're 11-year-old little boy, and in a way, not knowing what's going to happen to you. I mean, that, like, my brain goes, if that didn't happen, then what would have been the trajectory of your life?
Yeah.
Because it's a blessing in disguise, of course.
Yeah, and you know what? I talk about that in my book. I kind of felt at first like I had always felt because of the circumstances of my birth and what people, kind of looked at me as is I was a mistake, that, I shouldn't have been here, that I was a product of a rape. Like that was always going through my head. And then, my stepdad beating on me all the time. And it was just like, no one likes me. And then this happened. And then I'm the one that goes to my gram. Now, me and my gram always had a great relationship, but it almost felt at the time that my mom had given up on me too easily. Like, okay, here's my chance to get rid of this kid. He's caused me nothing but trouble. And, so I felt a lot like that at the beginning of it. But then, somewhere along the line, I realized, that wasn't the case. And I think my gram put a lot of worth in me uh, by telling me how special I was and how I was going to live a life, a great life and make something of myself. So I think that kind of got in there. And then I just started having some successes and started to get some value from other people, friends and other families. And, I always had that feeling in the back of my head, like I was pretty good at sports and played football and track and field, and I wrestled. And I remember people coming up to me and, dads who kids were on our team, and man, they would just hype me up so much. But yet I had no dad at the game. And I'm thinking like all these guys are like coming up here thinking, wow, how good I was. And I'm like, and I don't have a dad here. These guys are. So I had a lot of those feelings growing up, but fortunately, I was able to overcome them. And, I think it's pretty unfashionable, but the one thing I think is very important is you need to be your own biggest hero, because there is no amount of cheering from the sidelines of life that are going to have you reach your potential if you don't truly believe in yourself. And I think somewhere along the line, I started to do that and become my own biggest hero. And I think that's made a huge difference. And that's what I would suggest to everyone listening is, you know what, take a step back. I don't care if people think you're conceited or whatever. It's not about that, but it's about believing in yourself and understanding that, you've got this great potential inside of you. I mean, one of my favorite quotes is, a bird's not fearful to land on a branch because its faith is not in the branch, it's in its own wings. And when we do that in our own lives, when our faith is in us, it's not in the economy, it's not on other people. When it's in us, that's when we're going to soar. That's when we're going to take off, and that's when we're going to start living to our potential.
Yeah. Thank you for that too. I feel that you've pumped all our viewers there. We've got really nice comments like, wow, about overcoming a lot. And Bulalang from South Africa says, I respect Nelson. I love his thinking. Did you ever have a moment like where you recognized, wow, this really happened? Like you grounded in it, and like for me, how that shows up, like crying and trying that to heal. Did you have those moments?
Yeah, I mean, I have those moments. Like I said, I really feel like I need to pinch myself every morning, and then, as I said here,
But
people.
before you go there, I don't want you to jump over that question too quickly.
Yeah, no.
To help us see, when were those times when you were like, oh my God, this is worse than I ever imagined? Like, what was that like?
What when my life was worse than I ever imagined?
No. When you really started to like grasp, like, oh my, this is like almost, because when we're talking to you now, we're talking to the refined, like the one who's already kind of gone beyond it. So I really want to go, and I know how Bambos also, we're all really curious, like when you go back to like, we'll talk about like going into the fetal position. Like there was like moments when we had to go back to a certain pain in order to overcome it. So what, I guess I'm reframing Bambos's question. Like when were those moments? If there were, there might not have been, but when there were, how was it for you? What, like how deep of pain did you need to go to start healing again?
You know, I don't know that I had like those times in my life. I mean, as a child, I did. I mean, of
Okay.
course. But I think as an adult, I was always looking off into the future for better times. And, you know, I think that still works for me. Like I'm still looking off into the future. And that's probably not the most healthiest thing to do because I rarely live in the present. But I mean, there were those times like, you know, in my commercial real estate days, being named the #1 producer in my division worldwide for a top 5 commercial real estate firm. Like I remember looking at the guy who had won it a few years earlier, maybe 5 or 6 years earlier, and telling myself, "I'm going to be there," and then working toward it, and then being able to accomplish that, and then you know, selling one of my businesses and kind of getting that payday for all of that work, and then having my oldest son get married. You know, and having that, celebrating my 25th wedding anniversary to my wife.
Yeah.
You know, there's all these things that I just look back at like, wow, I've done it. So yeah,
It's
there's
incredible. I mean, it really does. It's funny because like so sort of Bambos, I speak for mine, but we often share like we had to overcome so much and go to such deep dark places. And what I've noticed, right, on some of our shows, we'll ask because there's a certain assumption people need to go into those dark places, but actually what we're finding out more and more, which I think is fascinating, is sometimes people's mindset is so fixed on I'm going to make this a better thing that they actually don't need to wallow in the pain. It's like, no, that's been there, done that. It's time to like move on. And it's quite fascinating to see because in one way that defines your success. So it's not a big surprise, is it? Because you didn't need to sit there and say, oh my God, woe is me. It's like, no, I have things to do and I don't have time. I don't have much time to get it done.
Yeah. And I think my mindset's always been like that. Like if it's not benefiting me, why on earth am I there? I mean, one of my strongest concepts is things only have the meaning you're willing to give them. And if we get to assign meaning to everything in our lives, why on earth are we going to assign a negative meaning? So I get as creative as possible, no matter how bad the circumstances or how dire the circumstances, is how can I, you know, where's the silver lining in this? What can I benefit from this? What's it teaching me? What am I learning? You know, and I give it a positive meaning. And
yeah, we've spent a lot of time, even to the point that I've driven Bambos a little bit crazy because we've had some people on that are scientists or that in the area of the neurotransmitters and the connections one makes, and it's kind of fascinating because we were talking that of course you have an experience, and then the experience is really is connected to a feeling and to an idea. So what I hear you doing is being very consequent about making sure that your experiences are connected to ideas that serve you, not to ones that take you down a negative loop. So it's quite fascinating to hear it, even in your way, you're doing it more practically, where other people will do, they'll do cognitive therapy, where they'll help people who have a negative association to an idea create a different association to that same idea. Yeah.
Well, and that was the circumstances of my birth. Like I said, I never told anybody about that. When I moved away from that town, I didn't want anyone to know that. And now, as I said here, I'm telling the world this story about, you know, my grandfather and me and my mom, and those circumstances didn't change. The only thing that changed was the meaning that I gave it. And, you know, I think a lot of people can do that with a lot of traumatic things in their lives. Is I am the person who I am because of that. And if I would have traded that, who knows where I would have ended up? Who knows what type of life I would have ended up living? Who knows what type of husband I would have been if I would have had a normal father in the home, or what type of father I would have been, or just slightly irritating father that I didn't like. Where would I be, as opposed to making a promise to myself, I'm never going to be that type of husband. I'm never going to be that type of father. And now that's made me the man that I am. So we've got to get creative with some of this trauma in our lives and spin it, find the silver lining, and give it that positive meaning, and let it propel your life. Don't let it drag you down.
You know what I love is if we put you in a turban and you slowed your speech down by about 50%, we could turn you into a guru very easily. Because all of the insight you're speaking from is the same insight that anyone who's come through a vast journey, which creates the deeper awareness, right? It's not, you're not speaking from something you read in a book, you're speaking from an experience, and then that experience sort of supports others who are struggling. And that's basically what every guru does, except they don't wear a baseball cap, they wear a turban. So in that way, we can spruce you up a little bit and put you on a pedestal, and then all of a sudden you could have followers.
Hey, man. Sounds good. No, I'm just, you know what? That was part of my book, is I wanted people to realize that I didn't just learn this on the internet. I didn't learn it in a book. I absolutely have learned a lot from the internet and a lot from the book, but I've lived it. And then I've practiced those strategies and techniques. And I think that's a lot of things is people will learn these things. People will hear these things that we're talking about, but they only do you good if you're actually going to put them into practice. And people are always out there looking for the newest knowledge and the newest spin on something. But if they would just take what they already know and say, okay, I'm implementing this in my life, their lives would be infinitely better in a year or 5 years or 10 years. And that's what my program, I Got Smarter, does. Is we don't have a knowledge problem when it comes to achieving our goals. We have an execution problem. We just don't do what we know we need to do. And that's what my program will help people do.
I love it. I absolutely love it. We'll put that in the comment section, so people that are interested can go to that as well. If people are interested, what is the website that they would go to, or how do they find you for more information?
Yeah, you can go to nelsontressler.com and everything is there. The book, The Unlucky Sperm Club, You're Not a Victim of Your Circumstances, but a Product of Your Choices, is available everywhere books are sold. It's probably easiest at Amazon. And like I said, it's on Audible. And then
read the book, write a review.
Yes, please.
Write a review. That's the bane of every author's frustration, is that getting the reviews of people who've read their book, You know
what? I love it though. I think I've got 70 reviews and it's a 5-star. So
nice.
I'm stoked about that people are enjoying it. And then my program, I Got Smarter, it's all one word, I Got Smarter. You can find that at igotsmarter.com, and it's available at the app stores, both Android and Apple.
Nice.
Thank you.
I just want to say, Nelson, that what I really appreciate about you, it feels like you didn't leave any stone unturned in your past where you didn't shine love.
Yeah, thank you.
I really appreciate that about you.
Yeah, and again, I try to give everything in my life a positive meaning, and I've carried grudges around earlier on in my life, and it didn't benefit me. And you know what? This is my life. Carrying around a grudge is like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies, right? And never works. So I want to be happy. I don't want to drag that baggage around with me, and I don't want to be that type of person. So I'm trying my best to live the life that I'm going to be proud of when I get to the end of it.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Love you.
Thank you for being with us. It was really great. We went over our time quite substantially, but it was really great to be with you. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you guys so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Wow. That was quite a journey, wasn't it? Amazing.
Yeah, remarkable. Yeah, go on.
Something that he said that really touched me, I mean, a lot of things he said touched me, but one of the things was that, and I see this happen a lot in me, is I make an assumption that when someone went through a trauma at a young age, that would be something that might have been hard to recover from. And what I find interesting is that when one is lived that life, they don't know the difference. So it's strange. There's an arrogance in it, and that I'm discovering, is that, oh, that life was experienced as a struggle, where in actuality it just was their life. So if you don't know the difference, you don't even think that it was bad per se. It just was the way you were living, and you just kind of assume, oh, people kind of have the same issues.
Yeah.
And I just saw when he said that, it kind of hit me. I was like, wow, yeah, it's true. If you have,
we made that, we kind of had that assumption through the question. Second guess, that kind of reaffirmed that there's another experience.
Yeah,
I find that very beautiful, and I love. Actually, I love how open we are that it also exists.
Yeah, me too.
Kind of using it to discover that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Wow. Well, stuff come up for you. What was going on for you?
In what way?
As you heard the story, I know sometimes you have a sensual response to it that isn't necessarily easy to put words to. So I was wondering, now that we have a little bit more space, were there things that came up for you specifically, not questions, but things that you were feeling or sensing as Nelson shared?
No, nothing is coming up for me specifically
Yeah.
in the way you're asking.
Yeah, beautiful. You know what I do, because I am also a bit sensual, I have to write notes down, because I won't remember them if you ask me 5 minutes later. So I always write like 10 words down, just single words of whatever happens inside of me as I hear someone speak, because I don't even know. I get lost in every discussion, I noticed. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very inspiring to have him. Like, as you know, in my country, I did listen to a lot of motivational talks from people that struggled, and it was very beautiful to share this time with Nelson anyway. The way he spoke, it was very embodied, and
yeah, really
I didn't feel I had a lot of questions because he was by himself just sharing, right?
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I think we can call that a day, right?
So we're gonna see you guys tomorrow.
Yes, we will.
Bulala, rest of your birthday.
Enjoy your birthday, Bola Long. Thank you for joining us on another episode of A Wonderful Chaos.